And so the Fed is in a collusion with the large banks of the world, be it Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Stanley, et cetera. And the incentive there is not to balance a budget. The incentive there is to print money at will. So the Fed prints money that goes to their banking friends. And many of the guys who are at the banking side actually serve at the Fed and the Treasury. So we have actually collusion that takes place. And given most presidents, most Congress people really don't understand how finances work, many of them have frankly never had to run a budget or probably pay employees, et cetera. So they print money as they need. And that printing of money is what's got the United States into the current situation. And the printing of money now is backed up by theory. There's a lot of academics who promote the theory called modern monetary theory, MMT. And what MMT says is print as much money as you want. Don't worry about it. Just control inflation. And so as a result of that, if you go back in recent times, 2008, when all the banks collapsed, as we know, because they were incentivized to give loans to people who frankly should never have gotten loans. And when the banks collapsed, and they were making a lot of money giving these loans, when the banks collapsed, there was no judgment upon them, meaning they didn't collapse. Obama printed close to a little bit more than $8 trillion, a la the Fed, approved through Congress to save all these guys. And all these guys are one person of the swarm, as I call it, protecting another person. Trump came in and he did the same thing. They created a crisis called the quote unquote pandemic. The economy was once again failing 8 years later, and they printed more money. Trump printed $8 trillion in one term. And now most people know that the economy is running on fumes. And instead of addressing the fundamental issues, they attempted to create a war in Ukraine to cover that up. They attempted to do another pandemic. So what they've now created is this situation in Gaza, which is going to quote unquote rationalize their justification to print more money. So the fundamental issue is that most people in Congress do not understand why you should balance a budget. And the incentive is to print money at will. And this is what needs to be stopped. And one of the fundamental ways to stop this is you have to eliminate the Fed. The Federal Reserve, there's no need for its existence. We also have to recognize that the collusion between the Federal Reserve, the Treasury, and the bankers, there's a significant amount of corruption. Some people should be prosecuted and indicted for this.
Do you believe that America is a great country?
Look, I'm an immigrant, and my parents came here. I came here when I was 7 years old. And when I got off the airplane, I was 7. I'd asked my dad why we came here, and he said for one simple reason. He used one word: freedom. So freedom to put ideas forward, freedom to innovate. The freedom to have your ideas debated in public is what makes this country great. Now, unfortunately, on November 16th, 2018, it was Donald Trump, with the support of both wings of Congress, that unanimously voted for something called the Cybersecurity Information Security Act, which essentially destroyed the First Amendment, at least on online media. So we have a significant problem in the United States because the social media companies are controlled by government. And this is not something theory for me. You're looking at a victim of that, because when I ran for Senate in the United States, where we won the election in September of 2020, it was the government of Massachusetts which contacted social media companies using this portal that was created out of that Cybersecurity Information Security Act, which allowed them to throw me off Twitter because I was exposing the fact that the government had deleted ballot images, which is a violation of 52 U.S.C. 20701. So we have no real freedom of speech on social media anymore. 4 major companies control it, and those companies are controlled by government. So the first thing I would do as president would be to repeal the Cybersecurity Information Security Act. But that's what made America great, this freedom. But it was Trump who talked about Make America Great, who signed into law the abridging of the destruction of the First Amendment. The First Amendment, passed in 1781, says Congress shall pass no law to abridge freedom of speech. And that's exactly what Congress did. And it was Trump who signed that into law. Now, in my view, had Hillary done that, there would have been a revolution in this country. So the elites, the swarm, as I call it, put Trump into power so they could execute something so egregious as this, which destroys the First Amendment. So yes, America is a great country. However, we have the Zionists, in my view, and the swarm, which has hijacked America. And their goal is to destroy the American working class, which is a bulwark of the American dream. And that's what they're doing systematically, particularly starting in 1970. And either every obvious version of quote unquote misleader of the establishment or the not so obvious misleaders have been doing this in collusion with the swarm to essentially destroy everything that America stood for. And the destruction of the First Amendment with the passage of that act reflects that.
So you went into my third question. What is your position on the First Amendment, free speech?
I don't just have a position. You're looking at someone who is probably the number one fighter for free speech in modern times. It was in September of 2020, during my United States Senate race, and I was running as a Republican at the time in Massachusetts, that I found out my election was stolen. But more importantly, I found out that the ballot images, which are on paper ballots, the paper ballot, when you put it to a machine, is scanned and an image is made. Those images, according to a federal law, need to be maintained campaign for 22 months. So when I requested those images and I tweeted out that in the government of Massachusetts that they deleted those images. In fact, they didn't preserve them. So when I tweeted this fact out that over 1 million ballot images were deleted, I was thrown off Twitter. One of the news, Reuters, reported that the government contacted Twitter to throw me off for spreading quote unquote misinformation, when in fact they've documented they deleted those ballot images. That resulted in a historic lawsuit where I represented myself against 3 lawyers against the government, and I won a federal injunction. And what's unfortunate is none of the so-called grifters from this guy, Tucker Carlson, Glenn Greenwald, ACLU, intentionally concealed that lawsuit because I wasn't part of the left or the right. And that lawsuit is the one that exposed the fact that government, starting in 2018, established a backdoor portal to all social media companies to essentially throw off those people that were exposing government. This is the foundations of the First Amendment. Political speech is the highest protected form. I was the one who filed a lawsuit. No lawyer in Massachusetts wanted to take this on, and we discovered that government indeed has this portal. When I was put back on, when I once again exposed these facts through documentary evidence, I was thrown off permanently. That led into a larger lawsuit where I discovered all of the documents that was created between the Democrats and Republicans, left and right, in collusion with academics, in collusion with the Pentagon, in collusion with the CISA and DHS to basically track, blacklist, and monitor and surveil U.S. citizens. That became a significant lawsuit. The judge was so impressed with my findings, he thought I would be fine just going back on Twitter, but he wanted me to drop all claims against the government. I refused, and that has now become the basis of a new lawsuit against DHS and CISA. So you're looking at someone who's actually fought for the First Amendment in 2020. And what you've seen since then with the quote unquote Twitter files, and by the way, Elon Musk is not a free speech absolutist. He works for the government. Where Elon Musk ends and government begins, nobody knows. So what's happened right now is conservatives are bamboozled into thinking that everything's fine on platforms like Twitter, but it isn't. The government still has a backdoor censorship portal into all social media companies, and all the owners of these social media companies are essentially government agents. So the first thing I would do is repeal this Cybersecurity Information Security Act if we want freedom of speech anymore, particularly online. So our campaign believes that the future is offline, door to door, talking to people, because online media is completely controlled end to end.
What is your position on the Second Amendment?
My position on the Second Amendment is simple. I think K through 12, we should actually give weapons training to children to learn how to use weapons, to actually understand the importance of the Second Amendment. And this should continue all the way, particularly during the public school education. The reason is that what makes America actually great, not by just a slogan, is particularly the Bill of Rights, but particularly the First and Second Amendments. No other population on the planet was afforded the freedom of speech, which was supported by the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment wasn't created so you could go hunting pheasant. The Second Amendment was created as reflected in the Declaration of Independence. So a citizenry, if it feels that the government has become destructive, has a right to alter it and abolish it. And the foundations of the Second Amendment, the spirit of it was that we would not have standing armies, that we would not have militias, but people would be armed and they could defend themselves against their own government. So I'm a big proponent of the Second Amendment. 3% of the world's population, which is the American people, 3 out of around 8 billion people, are the only people that have it. It makes the American working class really the tip of the spear of the global movement for freedom. And I have a very different opinion on the left and the right on this issue of gun violence. And I've, as a systems scientist, as an engineer, as an MIT PhD who studies these things from a system standpoint, the left argues that it's guns that kill people, and the right argues it's for our hunting, or they say it's drugs or it's video games. Neither are right. What is revealed that neither wing of the establishment wants to talk about, that it is income inequality. And there's a substantial amount of very fundamental research which shows that income inequality is a fundamental reason for gun violence. If you look at the United States, there's the highest income inequality and the highest amount of gun violence. If you look at every state in the United States and you do apply the same Gini score, Gini, which maps income inequality, and you draw that on the x-axis, on the y-axis, you draw gun violence, you get a very interesting curve, a line that goes up: more income inequality, more gun violence. And neither the left or the right want to address this, because the left talks about working people, talks about helping people, but they're actually part of the swarm. And the right wing doesn't want to discuss this because they make money off exploiting labor. So if we want to ensure that the Second Amendment survives and is not compromised, we have to address income inequality.
What is your belief on big government?
In my view, the purpose of the founders of this country to put responsibility at the individual level, and government's function was supposed to be very limited. And that's what the purpose of the Constitution was, to limit government's rule of people, perhaps to protecting the border, right? Some level of infrastructure. That's about it. But the idea, the spirit of this was that the individual, at the individual level, at the local level, would take responsibility. So I'm a big believer, to be more accurate, not only in small government, but decentralization to local levels, and particularly making the individual accountable. As a part of this, if you look at every one of my policies on healthcare, healthcare. People come to our town hall, which we do every Thursdays at 11 a.m. and 8 p.m. When we take healthcare, what do we say? We say, look, the government is not going to do anything on healthcare except make it bigger and bigger, more expensive. The corruption sets in. Ultimately, the individual has to take responsibility for their own health. One of the most powerful ways to take care of your own health is to boost your immune system. And you're talking to someone as a scientist, have a PhD at MIT, out of MIT in biological engineering, one of the leading scientists on the immune system and aging are very closely related. So individuals should learn and fight for the protection of their immune systems at the local level. That's going to lead to taking care of what food you put into your body, ensuring that you have real health care at the local level, a one-on-one relationship with your doctor, not big healthcare and so on. You look at the environment. Ultimately, we have to support our local farmers. You look at education. It is the students learning how to think, not what to think. And we can go on innovation. Great innovation actually occurs outside of the fringes of outside and the edges, beyond Silicon Valley, beyond big companies. And I know this because I created email, this system as we know it, as a 14-year-old kid working in Newark, New Jersey. Email was created not at the big institutions, not by the government, not by the military industrial complex, but me, a 14-year-old kid, solving a civilian problem, helping secretaries go from the interoffice mail system to what we now know as email, which is what I created, named it email, and I have the first US copyright. So when you look at every issue, economy, education, things occur at the edges when people take responsibility. Government ultimately ends up colluding with big corporations, and you create monopolies, which actually destroy innovation, destroy education, destroy health, destroy the economy, destroy pretty much everything. So decentralization is a goal. And the foundation of everything I've done, and I've taught this to people, is a systems approach. One of the foundations of systems science is decentralization and the concept of self-organizing systems.
The 10th Amendment states, the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. Should the U.S. enforce its borders?
First of all, this is, again, every one of the questions you're asking is not theory. You know, I came here as a legal immigrant, and I think you did also, Marcel. My father came here first. He was an engineer, and he got a job leaving India. And we had to wait about a year. We didn't see our father for a year. We had to wait in line. In those days, you had to submit your credentials, your resume, all sorts of stuff. And that was a price my mom, my sister, and I paid because we didn't see our dad for a year. But if you waited in line, you came in as legal immigrants. So first of all, we have to recognize that neither the Democrats nor the Republicans, the establishment parties, or quote unquote fake independents have any interest in addressing immigration because they profit from it. One wing profits from a voting bloc, another wing profits from cheap labor. So there is a way to address this. And here's my solution. Number one, although there's about potentially, if you look at the numbers, around 20 million potential legal immigrants in the United States, illegal immigrants. And I would argue a whole set of them are probably working very hard. We have to understand that they came from countries where they had to flee because of U.S. policy supporting dictators in these countries. And the United States has to recognize that the chickens have come home to roost from these very imperial policies. But nonetheless, you have the realities. You have people here who made it here, and many of them are working. Many of them work very hard. I would say for those people who work hard, give them a path to citizenship over 10 years, but they must pay taxes. And that would generate about probably $1 to $2 trillion, depending on how you cut it, which adds significantly to the budget. Anyone who's obviously a criminal and who's done harsh crimes, they should be sent out. But in addition to that, and I've talked about this since 2017, 18, and others have actually stolen this concept, is there are American citizens who are rigging the system. They are able-bodied working people, and they are collecting money from tax dollars, and they're fully capable of working. And I think those people should also be read out. You give them 24 months maximum to get off their butts and go to work. Or you say, look, you're going to lose your citizenship too. So citizenship should be recognized. Service is citizenship. Do you serve this country? What do you stand for? Are you actually contributing? If you're leeching off this country in any way, it doesn't mean you get a citizenship for life. So I think we need to look at citizenship now in a much more deeper way of who is actually serving this country. Right now in the United States, the average American's lifespan is going downward because of the policies, the healthcare policies over the last 80 years. Income inequality has created a lot of stress in people, the poisons in the food, the poisons in the air, and so on. It's not just the quote unquote vaccines, but over the last 80 years, the lifespan of the average individual is going down. So if you have a child, the child's lifespan is going to be shorter than you as an adult. It's quite extraordinary. The only way out of this is for the individual to take control of their health. One of the ways is to support your immune system. So people come to my town halls. We're not waiting to become president, but in that 1 hour town hall, we teach you what the immune system is. We teach you what are the foods, supplements, things you can do to boost your immune system. One of the most important ways to support your immune system in long life that came out of the work with the Sardinians off the coast of Italy is the number one reason people live long is they have community and friendships. People like Be effing Kennedy, Donald Trump, and others supported lockdowns during the pandemic, which actually destroyed people's immune systems. When you lock down people, you isolate them from family and friends. By the way, the number one reason people live long, you destroy the immune system. And that's what these guys did. So Trump, Kennedy, and all these people, in fact, every other candidate running was supporting lockdowns, was supporting masks, was supporting big pharma, and they destroyed people's immune systems. I was the only one at that time in March of 2020 who was on the streets protesting lockdowns, educating people of the power of boosting the immune system. We told people the importance of vitamin D, quercetin, zinc, iodine, these kind of things. We actually saved hundreds of millions of people's lives. So my credentials when it comes to healthcare already show that I know how to save people's lives. But supporting the immune system is the number one way. So we do that. People should come 11 a.m. and 8 p.m. Go to shivaforpresident.com/town hall and sign up for those town halls, but you learn something. Once you understand how the world is a system, your body is a system, politics is a system, everything in the world is a system. And there are 9 principles of systems, as I mentioned. And because the educational system isn't doing it, Marcel, I've decided to do it on my own. So people can go to truthfreedomhealth.com. You can get scholarships there. I used to teach at MIT. So you can get an MIT engineering system thinking education through this institute that I've created. Everything we do in our political campaign is driven to teach people systems thinking. When people donate to me, I don't ask for money. If people, without giving me anything back, people donate to me, I give them back books. I want people to think systems. It is systems thinking that is really going to change the world.
What should not be taught to our children and or left at the discretion of the parents?
Look, when I was in, I think, 8th or 9th grade, there was a subject called sex education, but sex education was really hygiene. I don't think I want to send my kid to a school that's teaching them how to do all sorts of sexual acts with another human being. I don't think this should be taught. I don't think any of this stuff should be taught. I think it should be made illegal, actually. These are things that are left up to the parent to do. By the way, to Shiva, #4president.com to find this. I also recommend, ours is a bottoms-up movement, Marcel. Again, you talk about decentralization, smaller government, we're practicing that. We want our people to get on the ground. So people can go to the website is Shiva, #4president.com. The important thing to recognize is that if you go to the free download section, there's a very important flyer there that I recommend everyone get. It really teaches how the lesser of two evils is killing our children. It has this wonderful graph which shows that the life expectancy in the United States is going downward. And this has been going on since 1980. And this is because of the policies of the left and the right and also the fake independence. There's a very nice educational video here, Marcel, which teaches people what is the swarm, who are the elites, who is our enemy. So the left side gives the problem and the right side gives the solution. One of the things is we encourage people to learn systems thinking. They can go to truthfreedomhealth.com, become what we call warrior scholars. And we also recommend people to come to our town hall. They can go to shivaforpresident.com/town hall. They'll learn about healing their body. They'll learn about the environment. They'll learn about education, innovation, governance, and economy. And we offer actual real solutions, not that they can practice right now. Obviously, if I become president, Marcel, just like I do this video, I'll do more videos like this, right? But we'll reach 8 billion people. So let me finish by playing this wonderful, inspiring video, which will summarize what we've talked about and let people know that go to Shiva for President, volunteer, get on the ground, go get our bumper stickers, but be an activist.